Mr. Speaker, can I welcome the Prime Minister's latest U-turn? I feel like I say that every week. Mandatory digital ID was a rubbish policy, and we on this side of the House are glad to see the back of it. Yeah. But yesterday, the Health Secretary said the Prime Minister's New Year's resolution should be, and I quote, to try to get it right first. To try to get it right first time. You did say that. My question is, does he agree?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm determined to make it harder for people to work illegally in this country, and that's why there will be checks, they will be digital, and they will be mandatory. And I'll tell her what this government is doing, whether on planning, child poverty, employment rights, investing in our NHS. We're taking the right choices for Britain, and they oppose every single one of them. And she talks about U-turns and consistency. From the party that used to recognise the challenge of climate change, and now they run from it, who promised to cut immigration, but then lost control of it, who once took great pride in our diversity, now they talk of deporting our neighbours to achieve cultural coherence. And Mr. Speaker, on consistency, don't get me started on 5 Prime Ministers, 6 Chancellors, 8 Home Secretaries, 16 Housing Ministers. They had more positions in 14 years than the Kama Sutra. No wonder then...
Right, so picture this. You're the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. You've got the job everyone told you that you wanted your entire adult life, and you're standing at the dispatch box getting absolutely roasted by Kemi Badenoch for doing more U-turns than a learner driver in a cul-de-sac. Welcome to Wednesday afternoon in Westminster, where Keir Starmer has decided that the words "I'm sorry" are apparently more toxic than admitting you like pineapple on pizza at an Italian restaurant. I'm Brit Article, and today we're diving into the absolute chaos that was this week's Prime Minister's Questions, where apologies went to die and the word waffling became the political insult of the year. If you're not already subscribed, smash that button and hit the bell icon, because British politics is serving up drama hotter than a Greggs sausage roll straight out of the oven, and you don't want to miss a single second of this mess. So let's set the scene, shall we? It's Prime Minister's Questions, the weekly gladiatorial combat where our elected representatives pretend to debate policy while actually just trading insults like Year 9s behind the bike sheds. Kemi Badenoch, fresh off her victory as Conservative leader and absolutely buzzing with that new leader energy, stands up and basically asks Starmer a very simple question. Mate, fancy apologising for all those U-turns? And Starmer, bless him, responds with the political equivalent of new phone, who dis? The man point-blank refuses to say sorry. Not a my bad, not an oops, not even a passive-aggressive mistakes were made. Nothing. Zilch. Nada. He's got more chance of admitting he secretly enjoys watching Love Island than apologising for policy reversals. Now here's where it gets properly spicy. Just hours before this parliamentary punch-up, news breaks that Starmer's about to bin off his plan for mandatory digital ID. Yes, you heard that right. Another U-turn. At this point, the government's doing so many reversals they could moonwalk better than Michael Jackson. Badenoch, being the opportunist that any good opposition leader should be, immediately pounces on this like a cat on a laser pointer. She's not here for pleasantries, she's here for blood, and she's armed with a list of U-turns longer than the queue at your local post office during pension day. But Badenoch doesn't stop at digital ID. Oh no, she goes straight for what she knows will sting, the family farm tax debacle. Remember that absolute car crash of a policy? Of course you do, because it's been dominating headlines like Taylor Swift dominates Spotify Wrapped. Badenoch lays it out beautifully. Some farmers were so terrified they sold their farms last year, only for the Prime Minister to U-turn 2 days before Christmas. 2 days before Christmas. Nothing says happy holidays, quite like realising you've panic sold your family's generational farm because the government kept changing its mind more often than your nan changes her favourite soap character. These farmers, already dealing with rising costs, unpredictable weather, and the eternal joy of subsidy confusion, sold up because they genuinely believed Labour was about to hammer them with inheritance tax that would make their children's inheritance look like pocket money. Then, surprise, U-turn, 2 days before Christmas. Imagine that conversation on Boxing Day. Remember when we sold the farm, love? Yeah, turns out we didn't need to. Fancy a mince pie? Absolutely devastating. And what does Badenoch want? A simple apology. Just 2 words, I'm sorry. That's it. Surely that's not too much to ask when your policy chaos has caused actual real-world consequences for people's livelihoods. But does Starmer deliver? Does he heck? Instead, he gives us what can only be described as prime ministerial waffle of the highest order. He says, and I quote, "The principle we put in place on inheritance tax is the right one. We listened. What we're doing is turning the country around." Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. He's managed to both defend the policy and the U-turn in the same breath, while apologising for neither. That's like crashing your mate's car, then saying, "Well, the principle of me borrowing it was right, and I listened when you screamed, so really I'm turning your insurance claim around." Badenoch's response, absolutely lethal. "I didn't hear an apology to the farmers." The silence that followed probably echoed through Westminster like a penny dropped down a well. Now, if you thought that was the end of it, buckle up, Buttercup, because Badenoch's just getting warmed up. She pivots to what might be the most savage point of the entire exchange. She brings up Mark Jenkinson, the former MP for Penrith and the Border, who committed the apparently cardinal sin of actually standing up for his constituents, you know, the farmers who were panicking about this inheritance tax. And what happened to him? He had the whip removed. Let that sink in. A Labour MP stood up for farmers in his rural constituency, voted against his own government because he believed the policy was wrong, and Starmer kicked him out of the parliamentary party. Then, and this is the kicker, Starmer U-turns on the policy anyway. So Jenkinson was right, but he's still been punished for it. Badenoch nails this point perfectly when she says, "This Prime Minister treats his MPs so badly. They follow his lead and he hangs them out to dry every time. It's like asking your friend to hold your pint while you go to the loo, then blaming them when you knock it over yourself. Absolutely brutal." But here's where we need to zoom out a bit, because this isn't just about one spicy PMQ session, or even just about farmers and digital ID. It's about a pattern that's emerging faster than mould on bread you forgot was in your bag. Since moving into number 10, and we're talking less than a year here, Starmer has been accused of U-turning on 13 major policies. 13! That's more than one per month if you're keeping score at home. We're talking farmers' inheritance tax, welfare reform, the grooming gangs inquiry that he initially resisted, then eventually announced, and now digital ID. It's like watching someone try to assemble IKEA furniture without the instructions while insisting they know exactly what they're doing. You can see the chaos unfolding, you know it's going to end badly, but they just keep confidently screwing bits together that definitely don't belong together. Now, to be fair, and we should be fair even when we're having fun, changing your mind when presented with new evidence or public backlash isn't inherently bad. In fact, it can be a sign of strength. Good leaders listen. Good leaders adapt. The problem is the presentation. If you U-turn on everything without ever admitting you got it wrong in the first place, you don't look like a responsive leader. You look like someone who never had a plan to begin with. You look like you're making it up as you go along, throwing policies at the wall like spaghetti and seeing what sticks. And when people's livelihoods are on the line, farmers selling their generational farms, that's not just bad optics, that's genuinely harmful.
The political implications of all this are absolutely massive. Badenoch, still relatively new to the job as Conservative leader, is clearly finding her rhythm, and boy is she making Starmer sweat. She's sharp, she's prepared, and she's not letting him off the hook for a single thing. This PMQ's performance will have Conservative MPs cheering in the tea room, and Labour backbenchers nervously checking their phones, wondering if they're next on the U-turn chopping block. For Starmer, this is becoming a credibility crisis. You can't run on being the serious, sensible, competent alternative to chaos, and then spend your first year in office doing more policy reversals than a Beyoncé choreographer. The public voted for stability, for a government that actually knew what it was doing. Instead, they're watching a masterclass in how to undermine your own authority, one U-turn at a time. And let's talk about that waffling comment, because honestly, it's perfect. Badenoch calling out Starmer for waffling is the political equivalent of your teacher saying, "I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed." It's dismissive, it's cutting, and it's exactly the kind of soundbite that cuts through because everyone who watched that exchange knows exactly what she means. Starmer gave a long answer that said absolutely nothing, defended his position while admitting he changed it, and managed to avoid accountability entirely. That's grade A waffling, the kind that would make a Belgian proud. Here's the thing about U-turns in politics. They're often necessary, but they need to be handled with honesty. The British public aren't stupid. They understand that governing is complicated, that situations change, that what looks good in opposition might be unworkable in government. What they don't appreciate is being treated like they won't notice. When you U-turn on farmers' inheritance tax 2 days before Christmas, after farmers have already made life-changing decisions, you can't just pivot to "we're turning the country around" and expect everyone to nod along. When you remove the whip for an MP for voting his conscience, then prove him right by reversing your policy anyway, you can't act surprised when people question your judgment. And when you refuse to apologise for any of it, you look stubborn rather than strong, defensive rather than decisive. The comparison to the previous Conservative government is interesting too. Starmer keeps trying to make the argument that everything his government does is about fixing Tory failures, turning around their mess, being better than the chaos that came before. But when you're U-turning as frequently as they are, that argument starts to look a bit hollow, doesn't it? You can't simultaneously claim you're the adults in the room and also constantly change your mind about what you're doing. Pick a lane, as they say. Either you're the competent government that knows what it's doing, or you're still figuring it out. You can't be both. So what does all this actually mean for British politics going forward? Well, for Starmer, it means he needs to get his messaging sorted immediately. Every time there's a U-turn now, it's not just about that specific policy, it's about adding to a growing narrative that his government doesn't know what it's doing. That's political poison. For Badenoch, this is gold. She's found an attack line that works, and you can bet your last Freddo that she's going to keep hammering it every single week at PMQs. She'll come prepared with lists, with examples, with questions that force Starmer to either defend the indefensible or admit he got it wrong, and watching him squirm might just be the best entertainment Westminster's provided in years. For the rest of us watching from home, it's a reminder that accountability in politics matters. When leaders refuse to apologise, refuse to admit mistakes, refuse to take responsibility for the real-world consequences of their decisions, trust evaporates faster than your motivation on a Monday morning. And once that trust is gone, it's incredibly hard to get back. Starmer came into office with a massive majority and public goodwill. He had the opportunity to be the steady hand, the Prime Minister who actually delivered on promises. Instead, he's becoming known as the Prime Minister who can't stick to a plan for longer than it takes to soft boil an egg. Look, British politics is never boring, but this level of U-turn chaos is something special. Keir Starmer refusing to apologise while Kemi Badenoch systematically dismantles his credibility is the kind of political theatre that reminds us why we pay attention to Westminster in the first place. Whether you think Starmer's responsiveness to public pressure is admirable or his constant policy reversals are a sign of weak leadership, one thing's certain, this story isn't going away anytime soon. Thanks for watching Brit Article, and I'll catch you in the next one.